Good afternoon, guys, and welcome back to Mark Anthony's Music Picks. Today is episode 93, and I'm going to be covering a label that I've been a fan of for more than a decade now, which is Auxiliary. Auxiliary is a very interesting label. It's run by James Clements, who is originally from the UK, but now apparently lives in the United States. And James is also an active member on the Discogs Dub Techno forum, so shout out to James. Nice to officially meet you through the YouTube mechanism. But anyways, the Auxiliary label to me is very interesting because it's my only place where I go to seek out drum and bass. Drum and bass is a little bit lost on me, I think because of the tempos that it runs at. So it's typically something around 170 to maybe 180 or 190 beats per minute, which is like super hectic and fast, but it also has the weird attribute of being able to dance to the half rhythm. So if you divide 170, I guess you would get 85, right? So you can, if you want to just kind of bob and weave almost like a hip hop rhythm at 85 or 90 beats per minute, you can do that, and that's where it kind of lands on me. So if it weren't for that, it would just be a complete mess, but because you can kind of chill to it, even though it's fast, there's kind of that duality there. I think it creates just like a nice, interesting break from the norm. The Auxiliary label doesn't just focus on drum and bass. There's also techno and tech house, and I'll talk about that a little bit here. But for me, it's mostly the drum and bass because I find the rhythms to be so interesting. ASC, aka James, has a way of bringing melodic components in. He also interfaces and partners with a lot of interesting producers from the last decade. Synkro, let's see, who else did he pair with? Brock Van Way and a few others that are a little bit. There's also Sam KDC. There's also like a few cohorts that he frequently combines and pairs with to create these magical, what I would consider to be timeless or time-tested now, drum and bass creations. The first record that I want to review for you today out of the catalog is one that I think is kind of representative of the Auxiliary sound, and it's this one here. This is ASC paired up with Synkro. Like I said, ASC often partners and pairs with other producers to add variation to a sound, and this is the Borderline / Sacred Moments record. It was hard for me to pick one. I actually think both tracks on here are really nice, and you can tell that Synkro's touch is in here because Synkro tends to make tracks that have like a sweet, almost, I always describe them as candy-like. There's something sweet about most of Synkro's tracks. He always adds a soft melodic piece. Rarely will it be just instrumental. And that paired up with ASC's ability to create really nice drum and bass rhythms made something really nice here. When I listen to Sacred Moments specifically, I get the feeling of, when a cold front has just come through and it's wintertime and there's not a single cloud in the sky, and maybe you go out on your porch at night and you're just looking up and there's a full moon. I get the feeling of flying through the air on a night like that and flying over all of my friends' houses and flying past my mom's house and waving down to her, "Hey, Mom." That's the vibe I get from listening to this. It's just this soaring, ethereal, beautiful, almost like feeling of release. like I said before, ASC has other sub-labels and other sounds that it brings to the table, not just drum and bass. There's techno and tech house, and this is an example of an ASC release that is what I would consider to be tech house. It's in the low to mid 120s for the tempo, and on this is the diode sub-label, right? Diode sub-label, and the EP is called the Solenoid EP. There's three actually really good, interesting tracks on here. If you like to play tech house or techno at a little bit lower tempo, you might find this EP interesting. My pick on here is Carrier. I like Carrier because it's got so much busyness, even though it's a slow record. There's a lot of techie elements. There's a lot of rapid fire elements that are hitting and pulsing. There's a lot of pulsing in the lower frequencies. So even though the track is slow, it creates this energetic feel to it. And I like how those two feelings offset each other here. One of the popular sub-themes of auxiliary or it's not a sub-label, but it's a subdivision, is the Cymbal series. And Cymbal has ASC, in some cases, partnering with other producers or other producers just being featured on the auxiliary label, releasing their own EPs. This one here is Method 1's EP. This is Cymbal number 5. And I probably sampled it originally because it was purple, and I tend to gravitate towards purple. I've talked about talked about that before. I'm very like weird about the records that I'll decide to randomly sample when I'm checking out websites and shopping Juno, etc. This is the Cymbal number 5 EP, and my pick on here is 5.2. The funny thing about this is, before I made this episode, I thought that this EP was a 45 on both sides. I thought it played at 45 RPM. So from the day that I bought this, I've been playing it wrong. And I didn't even know it. And now that I go back and listen to the official samples on YouTube at 33, it doesn't sound right to me. It sounds bad. I actually can't unhear it at 45. And I think it's really interesting that 5.2 on here, which is the one I'm going to give you the sample for, how it basically at 45 RPM morphs into this hard to describe tech house, drum and bass, techno, hybrid rhythm. I have danced to this many times by myself in my room and just absolutely gone nuts to it. So at that speed, it just hits at the right tempo for me. I think it lands at about 110-ish beats per minute at 45 RPM. But there's a lot of action in this track, and I hope you guys enjoy it at the wrong speed. Another super interesting pairing with ASC is Brock Van Way. Now, when I first saw this release here, this is symbol number 2. When I first saw that BV Dub, aka Brock Van Way, paired up with ASC, I thought that that was nuts. But actually, if you look at Brock's back catalog, if you listen to, for example, his No One, I think there's a triple pack on No One that Brock did. Some of the beats there are broken, and they're broken in a weird way that's hard to pin down if it, like, what genre it actually lands in. So now that I know more about Brock's back catalog, I don't feel like this is actually a weird pairing at all. It actually makes perfect sense. ASC and Brock paired up to make a mostly drum and bass release here. I actually reviewed this for the 5.3, which is, in my opinion, a progressive house. I reviewed this in my Brock Van Way episode, so I'll give you a link down to that below if you want to check that out. But for this episode, I'm reviewing Symbol 5.1. I love this because when you can hear Brock's softness come through, Brock always works with the angelic female vocals, and he's got a couple of them going on in this track, almost playing off of each other with some nice reverb. And there's just the one synth stab in here, the deep piano stab that hits and echoes a few times as it carries out. Man, that stab alone, I could listen to that on repeat, and I feel like this release is a home run and probably undervalued in the marketplace. I see you can still get it for like 30 or 35 bucks. I think this is a good investment. And my final pick for you today is basically a varied EP from varied artists, and it's on one of Auxiliary's sub-labels that I think is really interesting. It's called Veil Unveil. It's if you go to Discogs and search Auxiliary, you'll see Veil Unveil as the sub-label listed for this. And my special track on here, nice blue vinyl, by the way. This is really nice colored vinyl. My track on here is Method 1's Under the Stars. So this track came to me at a really critical point in my life. In 2015, 2014, I started going to trauma therapy for, some bad stuff that happened to me when I was a kid. And I learned in that therapy that things that happen to you need to be processed. If you just ignore something that happened to you and just try to get on with your life without ever actually dealing with it, you'll never actually get to 100% healthy from a mental state. So what you have to basically do is, like, an analogy would be if you had got shot, or if you were in battle and you had shrapnel stuck in you, yeah, maybe the skin heals over it, but the metal or whatever's in there, it sits there and it festers, and it actually gets worse. The longer that you sit and decide not to deal with a specific topic or something that you're not okay with, it festers and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it eventually will just start to bring you to a point where it forces you to deal with it. So that's where I got to in 2015, and I remember after having a specifically heavy session with my therapist, I came home, and for whatever reason, I had bought this vinyl that week, and I was listening to Under the Stars, and all of a sudden I started crying happy tears. And it was one of those things where, even though what I had talked about in therapy was really rough that week, the track was basically creating like an inflection point for, it's like, okay, you went down to this low that you had to go and visit, this uncomfortable low, and now you're starting to spin back up. So big thank you to Method 1 for being there and creating this turning point in my life, and I'm really thankful for it. All right, that's all, guys. As usual, please comment down below and let me know what your favorite auxiliary picks are. I know that ASC has a ton of new albums that came out, and he releases so much that I can't keep up with it. So if you have one or two or three that are like super stellar that I need to add to my want list, or you think I should spend some time on, please recommend them down below. James, thank you for everything. I love the label. I feel like a lot of that music is timeless, and there's some of these records that I just talked about in this episode I'm never getting rid of. That's all for today, guys. Take care and be safe. Peace.